But I'm not talking about you, right? I'm talking about my experience, right? I'm giving you exactly what I went through. And if you don't like it, I understand, but it's not about you, right? This is my story. In the police academy in October of 1990. Man, the 4-1 is in Hunts Point. And then it clicked. I was like, oh.
That your hat can't fit you. Either I'm with you or against you.
My experience in the police academy was all right. There was some funny times. I met some cool dudes. There were two things I remember, right? Right towards the end was the Rodney King beating. I remember the teacher brought it up, and it was obvious what happened. Yeah, the guy ran from the cops. That doesn't give you the right to beat the crap out of the guy. I mean, that was crazy. And I'll never forget this dude in my class when the teacher, who was black, she asked everybody's opinion. And this guy raises his hand and has the nerve to say, well, we don't know everything that happened. We don't know everything that happened, so we should wait before we cast judgment. And I turned around and I'm like, what are you, crazy, bro? I said, what could he have done? He's on the floor in the fetal position and he's getting beat by all these cops. I said, that's not our job. Everything says that he was running away and they caught up with him and this is what he got. Not to beat a dead horse, no pun intended. That was like an opening to what was to come. Now let me tell you, I met some cool white boys. I met some real cool white boys, real cool black people, and real cool Spanish people and Asians. I know I'm trying to be politically correct, but it's actually the truth, all right? But there were a few that made the job difficult, made the job not enjoyable. The other thing I remember about the police academy was Gun and Shield Day. That was a special day for two reasons. I was getting my gun and shield, and I remember throughout the whole 6 months in the academy, I would see this girl leaving. She was in the squad before mine, right? They had a A, B, and C squad. I was in the C squad. She was in the B squad. So I would always come to work when she was leaving. I liked this girl. I mean, I was really feeling her. And every day we'd pass each other and we'd always, hello, how you doing? We never had a conversation, right? But I would always say I'm going to talk to her. And for some reason, I had no problem talking to women, but for some reason, I liked this girl, so I was apprehensive. I knew this was my last chance. I knew it. I was like, oh man, you got to do it today. I'm all geeked out with this big black bag they used to make us carry, and my police uniform, the real uniform, not the recruit uniform. So I got all these things, and it's awkward. I used to get there basically at the same time every day, right? And I would see her every day. It was rare that I didn't see her in those 6 months, right? When I was getting to work. So I turn onto 20th Street like clockwork. Here she comes, but she's in her real police uniform because that was Gun and Shield Day for everybody. But since they were a squad ahead of us, they already got their gun and shield and their assignments. And she looked good in her uniform. In my head, I said, man, this is it. You got to talk to her, man. As soon as she got close to me, she smiled. I smiled, and I stopped her. And I said, how you doing? I said, oh, you look good in your uniform. And I asked her where she was going. She told me she was going to housing. PSA 6 in Harlem. They covered all of, like, the west side of Harlem. I said, all right, that's cool. I said, listen. And I didn't try to lay no heavy rap on her. I was just real. I said, listen, for 6 months, I've wanted to talk to you, right? But I never knew what to say. And I know today's my last opportunity. I'm hoping that you give me a chance to get to know you. So let me get your number, right? And she looks up and she's like thinking. I said, listen, if you don't like what I have to say, if you don't like my conversation, listen, I won't call you again. I won't bother you. I'm not the stalker type. That's not me, you know? I have high self-esteem, so I'm not going to put myself in that position. But let me get to know you. And she smiled, and it was like in slow motion as I see she reaches for a pen. Boom, I pull out my memo book, and I give her my memo book, and on one of the back pages, she wrote her name, Carmen Martinez, and her number. She was a Queens girl. That became my son's mother, all right? 2 years later, or a year later, we had my son, Elias. I'm happy, man. I'm getting the gun, I'm getting the badge, and I'm getting the girl. So I'm happy. I go into the police academy, and the first thing they make us do is change from the recruit baby blue uniform to a real police uniform. Then they let us down to the police academy firing range, and they gave us all our guns. I had a Smith & Wesson 4-inch barrel. I remember it had a brown handle, small brown handle. My hands were too big for it. I knew I was going to change that to and eventually I did. I put a nice rubber grip on it, and that was my duty gun. So after that, they had us all go back to our classrooms, right? By company. I was in company 9035. That was the year 1990, which is when I got into the academy, and company 35. Now, this was 1991. April is when I graduated from the academy. We go to the classroom, and I'm with my company. We had this instructor. He was a police officer. His name was Ulena. Now, Ulena was a good dude. He really was. He let me slide like so many times because I used to hang in the back. I had a little crew, like 4 or 5 dudes, and we were all hanging out in the back. And we'd be laughing and joking and whispering and farting. And he would just the most he would do was yell out, quiet, which also made us laugh because instead of just saying, guys, be quiet, he'd do it with a cadence every time. Quiet, right? And I would just bug out off that. Even saying it is taking me like right back to the classroom. But Ulena was a good dude. I ran into him later. And I'll tell you about that. So now we're in a police uniforms and we're in the classrooms. He starts giving us our orders. It's on a teletype. Everybody got their own teletype. But before he gave it to us, he would read what assignment we had, what precinct we were going to, what transit district or what housing PSA. That's what you call housing precincts. They're not called precincts. They're called PSAs, police service areas. And transit, they're not called precincts. They're called transit districts. Just District 1, District 12, like that. And of course, precincts are precincts. Anyway, so he's reading off the names. And I noticed when he read off the 4-5 or the 5-2, there was really no noise. Nobody said shit because those are quiet precincts. People just go up, boom. Murphy, 4-5. He get his orders, he sit down, he's reading the paper. Suarez, 5-0. Boom, Suarez go up. He gets his paper. But then you hear, McNeil, 7-5. And you hear, oh, shit. Thomas, 7-7. Oh, shit. In unison, like the whole class. It's like 40 people in the class, right? Then he called my name, right? He goes, 4-1. And you heard the same thing, the same oohs and ahs. Like you hear when guys are going 7-5, 7-7, 4-6 in the Bronx, 4-4 in the Bronx. 7-5 and 7-7 in Brooklyn, but those are wild precincts, right? We used to go by A, B, and C houses. A place like the 50, the 49, you know, those were all C houses. There's nothing but look, party noise on the weekend. Every now and then you might have, you know, some shit jump off. 19th, you know, Manhattan. But for the most part, nah. And you had your mid-level precincts. Like at that time, the 5-2 was mid-level. I heard it's wild now. Then you would have your A houses. Like I said, 4-4, 4-6, 7-5, 7-7, 4-1. I got to be honest, when he said 4-1, I had no clue where that was. After the whole classroom thing, they had us go downstairs to the auditorium, right? And in the auditorium, that's when I caught up with some people and I said, listen, where's the 4-1, right? They were like, one guy told me, yo, that place is a shithole. I'm like, really? Where is it? Excuse me. And he said, man, the 4-1 is in Hunts Point. And then it clicked. I was like, oh, okay, Hunts Point. I knew because I used to go buy my sneakers at Jew Man. Now, before you go labeling me anti-Semitic, that's the name of it. Google that shit, all right? That's the name of it, right? It was this Jewish family, and they had the flyest clothes. I mean, it was between them, and if you didn't care about going all the way in Manhattan, Delancey Street, Orchard Street, they had some fly shit there too. This Jewish family had 2 stores, one over there near Freeman Street, and the other one on Southern Boulevard. I used to get my shell tops there, you know, my Lees. Back then we wore Lees. You know, you could haggle with them. They were good people, very good people. Now I'm wondering, are they still around? You know, probably their kids have it. I said, yeah, that place is wild because I remember always hearing something jumping off in that Hunts Point area or that Hunts Point section of the Bronx. They gave us a week off. After that week, you know, I was ready. I was like, I couldn't wait to get to work. So that first day, I drove my car. I had a Buick 98 Regency. The 98, for those of you who don't know, it's not the year. It's just the model. 98 Regency. I had some nice Vogue tires with some nice spokes. I mean, classy, not all gaudy. It was nice. It was beautiful. It was champagne colored. The windows were tinted. It was nice. It was really, really nice. So I roll up on the block. I found a parking space. There was about an hour before roll call. So I started walking around, right? I walked around, had my uniforms. I started to feel nervous. Not at going on patrol. I wasn't nervous about patrol. I wanted to go on patrol. But I was nervous about being the new guy again, you know, because I knew this precinct had some real cops, some serious cops, you know. So I must have walked on that block, just on that block where the precinct was, for about 10 minutes, up and down, up and down, up and down. And eventually I said to myself, you know, what are you afraid of? The thing was that reality was setting in, because before stepping foot on that block, you know, I was telling myself I was going to change things. I was going to change the world, you know, me, just me, you know. That's how naive I was. You know, they say youth is wasted on the young. Now I look back and I say, yeah, that's true. That's very true. So at some point, you know, I said, let me go. I walk up to the front door. I remember I took a deep breath and I walked in. As soon as I walked in, I'm met by this middle-aged Puerto Rican lady, short, chubby, and she's sitting right on the other side of the precinct door. She's sitting there with this real cute young lady. She must have been 22, something like that, 23. I'm about 24 years old, right? I had just came off doing 3 years, working 3 years on Rikers Island as a correction officer, right? I got on that job in '87. So, and let me just say, I take my hat off to good correction officers. Have done that job for 20 years. You know, you got to have it in you. You know, now I did it for 3 years. It wasn't me. I'm glad I did it because I learned a lot about people and about myself. You know, I learned that I stand my ground no matter what, win or lose. I stand my ground, and that job taught me to stand my ground. Now, you know, I gave the inmates respect, but they gave it right back. They gave it right back. I was one of the only correctional officers that would get his hair cut in the jail barber. It was inmates, and they would cut my hair, and they respected that. Now, I was young, and was I supposed to be doing that? Nah, I wasn't. I wasn't. But in my young mind, that was my way of showing everybody that I wasn't afraid, and I did gain their confidence, and they gained mine. Because sometimes I'll be walking by, they'll be like, yo, CO, you don't want that shape up? And I'll be like, nah, I'll be there Friday or whatever, Anyway, met some good people there. Very, very good people. So back to the precinct. The Puerto Rican lady, and how do I know she's Puerto Rican? I'm from the Bronx, you could tell. You could just tell, right? So she asked me, can I help you? And I said, oh yeah, I'm newly assigned here. So I show her my tin, my badge, and my ID. So she looks at me with like a little smirk, and she goes, oh, okay. Go see the desk officer, let him know, right? So it's all right, thank you. And I'm walking away, but I'm noticing the little smirk on her face. It was like, does she know something I don't? I said, all right. So I'm walking towards the precinct, and then all of a sudden I realize how busy the place is. I mean, there's cops in uniform walking back and forth, paperwork in their hand, right? These are notes, by the way, in case I forget something, because there's certain points I wanna touch on, certain experiences that I had that I want to touch on. I want to make sure I don't forget. So every now and then I'm gonna glance down, right? Anyway, so I'm going off the dome right now, all right? But you'll notice. So I'm walking towards, and like I said, the precinct's buzzing. I mean, people are just back and forth. And I look to my left, and I see what I knew were plainclothes cops, right? There's about 3 or 4 of them, and they're talking to these 2 people, and the 2 people, they look like they were having some kind of trouble. Not that they were in trouble, but like they just looked like they were in distress. You could just tell from the face and the way they were moving around and talking. I kept walking, and, I see cops and people, they're looking at me. I felt like I was walking the plank, and I tried to be as confident as I could. I tried to tap in to the way I used to walk on Rikers Island as a correctional officer, because after being there for 3 years, I was confident. All right. So as I'm walking towards the desk, to my right, I see a group of Spanish officers, right? Latinos. And they're all looking at me with the same smirk the lady had on her face, right? Later, I found out in that group was Willie Sotolongo, Cecil Negron, Fat Jerry Blanco, and young Ricky Colon. That was them. I checked them out, and I remember noticing that their leather looked worn, like compared to mine. My shit was brand spanking new. That shit was like, how leather gets worn and it gets a little like brownish, worn? Yeah, it looked like that. But it was a cool look. It was a cool look. So, and I know we're living in a time where everybody's sensitive. I'm not from that school. I'm not. Like when I was growing up, you know what I mean? Not that you had to be a tough guy, but people weren't offended. Like if you said, I'm going to Jew man jeans, like that was nothing. And the reason I'm saying this, because I said Fat Jerry Blanco, listen, that's what we called him. So if anybody gets offended, relax, fall back, because that's what we called him, and he was cool with it. He was totally cool with it. That's what we called him, Fat Jerry Blanco. So now I keep going, and I get to the desk. The desk looked larger than life to me. It's the first time I went in this place, and the place was big. And the guy behind the desk, to me, looked like a giant, right? He's up on this thing. And I know that he notices that I'm there, right? But he doesn't acknowledge me. I don't want to be rude because the guy keeps writing, right? But then I said, all right, well, I'm there like a minute. Started feeling a little foolish. So I did what they told me to do when I left the academy. I introduced myself the way they said to introduce yourself. So I cleared my throat and I said, excuse me, sir, I'm PPO so-and-so. And only then did he pick up his head. But when I saw his face, he had a scowl, right? He had like a mean look on his face. And later I found out that was Lieutenant Wickerwich, Lieutenant Wickowicz had a reputation, a bad reputation of being super strict.
Officer Serpico, report.
That fucking thing on your lip, it goes. And get a haircut.
Sir.
That's an order. You look like an
With a mean streak.
with dentures.
Do I have the right of appeal, sir?
Sure. Go see Captain Tolkien. You got one foot in shit already. Put the other one in.
Now, if you ask me, that's not a good combination. But he looks at me. He said, "What the fuck is a PPO?" You know, he completely dissed me. And as I start talking, he waves like this, like he doesn't care. He goes, and he yells out, "Yo, Rick!" And that was one of the Latino officers that was in the group. And young Ricky Colon comes over, and the lieutenant tells him, "Rick, take this guy upstairs. He's going to be working here now." So now Ricky looks at me. I was a little taller than Ricky, but Ricky was good looking, smooth type, Puerto Rican dude, right? So he looks at me up and down like this, right? He goes, "Yo, you working here?" And I said, yeah, I'm assigned here. And right in front of my face, he does the sign of the cross. And he goes, 7,300 in a wake up. Oh, Lord. Welcome to Fort Apache, rookie. And of course, I understood the rookie part, but I didn't know all the other shit he said. I had no idea what he meant. But I played it off, I smiled. He goes, "Come on." So I followed him. So we go up like 2 flights, maybe 3 flights, and he opens his door, and it's a big room with what seemed like 100, 200 lockers, right? And it was rows and rows and rows of lockers. And at the end of the first row, there was a big open window, right? And through the window, you could hear Spanish music. Now, Ricky was talking to me, but I remember the song, right, that was playing. It was Aquel Viejo Motel, right? That's That Old Motel. It's a song about 2 young lovers, this guy's in love with her, she's a virgin, and that's the hotel where they made it happen, right? Or the motel, right? The no-tell motel. That's where they made it happen. And that was a big hit in the Spanish community back then. And I remember kind of zoning out. And all I could see was Ricky's lips moving, but I wasn't hearing him anymore. I was enjoying the music, and for some reason, the music was hitting right. It was perfect for that time and that place, and I was enjoying it. But then, I kind of caught myself, and I said, "Yo, this dude's talking to you." So I zoned back in at the perfect time, because right there, Ricky asked me, "Yo, you work out, right?" It was obvious. I was, I'm 5'10". That time I was 230. I was type diesel, I said, yeah, I work out, man. He goes, "Yo, come here, let me show you something." So we go up another flight of stairs, and he opens the door and he shows me the precinct gym. And, it was no big deal, nothing crazy. At the time, the gym that I really used to go to was in Pelham Manor. It was called MetroFit. Great gym, good people. It was like, that gym was big. Took up like a whole block. They had everything in there, even racquetball courts, right? And so when I saw the gym, the precinct gym was small, but you could definitely get a good workout in there, because really it doesn't take much. The dudes in jail used to work out with buckets, and push-ups, and their physiques would be good. As a matter of fact, I used to work out with my house gang. I had 5 dudes on my house gang, and I made sure I got all dudes that worked out, and they ran the house. I had this one guy, Madison. Madison was definitely an EDP. He's emotionally disturbed. EDP is emotionally disturbed person. And Madison was definitely off his rocker. Like, I'd have to watch him. But he was definitely an enforcer, because sometimes some unruly person would come into my house, thinking like, this house was... See, I took complete control of the house. I didn't let anybody get robbed in my house. I don't care if you had the flyest sneakers, you weren't getting robbed in my house. And after a while, a lot of inmates wanted to live in my house. But Madison was definitely an enforcer. Unfortunately, he had unalived his mother with a ball peen hammer. I mean, come on, man. Like, what does it take? Wow. But so I looked at the gym in the precinct. And I was like, wow, this is pretty good. This is definitely pretty good. And then he goes, "Now check this out." He takes me across the hall. This was what threw me for a loop. There was a complete handball court. I mean, I was like, oh shit. I mean, it was the lines, everything it was nice. And like I said, the gym I used to go to, I'd get on the racquetball court sometimes. So, it's kind of similar. And I said, wow, I like this. I like this. I'll definitely be coming up here. So far, my introduction to Fort Apache was nice, Now, he goes, yo, come on, let's go back downstairs. So I follow him, go downstairs, back to the locker room. And, we're having a good conversation. And he goes, listen, man, I got 3 lockers, right? I'm going to give you one of mine because the ones that they had set aside for you guys, that row, some of those lockers don't even work. You can't even lock them, And there's like a leak in the corner. Your shit's going to get all dirty. I said, yo, you seem like a cool dude. That's what he tells me. He goes, yo, you seem like a cool dude, so I'm going to give you one of mine. I got 3. So I was like, yo, Rick, thanks, man. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. And, he takes his lock off. He asks me about a lock. I said, yeah, of course, boom. So he gives me the locker, takes his shit out, puts it in one of his other lockers. So before he goes, listen, man. He goes, what do they call you? And I said, yo, they call me Papo, right? So he says, what are you? I said, I'm black and Puerto Rican. I said, I got the best of both worlds, Rick. So he laughs. He goes, no doubt, no doubt. So he tells me, listen, man. He goes, yo, there's some people here you can't trust. So my advice to you is fall back, keep your mouth shut, just learn the job. I said, all right. I mean, let's be honest. That's good advice anywhere you go, right? Anywhere you go, you can't just walk in places where you don't know anybody on some rah-rah shit. You can't go in there like that. That's how it was in corrections too. So I said, all right, Rick, no problem. I understand. And, he gave me a